Hello friends, and welcome to CEC online lectures. In the ongoing series on conservation of medicinal plants, in the last couple of lectures we discussed that there is a substantial increase in the demand of herbal medicinal plants, their products, whether they are used for cosmetics or for their therapeutical efficacy. And this substantial increase in the demand has put tremendous pressure on the natural resources. As we discussed that majority of the industrial requirement is fulfilled by the collection of the medicinal plants, which are obviously used as the raw material, is being done from the natural sources or the natural habitat where the plant is growing wildly. And this pressure has led to the issues of conservation of various medicinal plant species. Now, with the passage of time, the global agencies like WHO, IUCN or CITES, they have initiated the process for the conservation of these important medicinal plant species. And because of this, the guidelines related to the conservation of these species was laid down by WHO. We discussed that the guidelines are divided on the basis of 4 objectives, that is basic studies, utilization, conservation, communication and cooperation. Now we also discussed that the first objective, that is the basic studies, it is mainly dealing with the use of traditional knowledge or the use of the medicinal plants on the basis of the traditional knowledge, and how this knowledge can be gathered using various surveys that are normally organized or should be organized by the government agencies. So in every part of the country related to the conservation of the medicinal plants, the government basically organized various surveys in order to get an idea about the population of a particular species in that particular region. So in these guidelines, it was also suggested that the government should incorporate the established traditional remedies in their healthcare system and so on and so forth. So whatever traditional remedies that are very well established in the traditional systems of medicines, they should be incorporated into their main healthcare system in order to give benefit to larger people. Then we started with the second aspect of this objective, that is the identification of the medicinal plant and outlining of their distribution. In this we discussed that the role of herbarium sheets in establishing the identity of the plant species and what type of information should be included on the herbarium sheet. And this information was related to the name of the plant species, its botanical name, its vernacular name or the name by which that plant is being named or known in the local language, who is the collector, when the plant was collected, what was the time of the collection, where was the plant was collected. So all kind of information should be included on the herbarium sheet. We also discussed the importance of national herbariums. So in those guidelines we discussed that the government should promote the establishment of national herbariums, wherein the information regarding different medicinal plant species should be stored, various herbarium sheets of different species should be stored. So whenever there is an ambiguity regarding the identity of a particular species, one can easily correlate the characters of the species in question with the herbarium sheets that are already available in those national herbariums. So thereby removing the ambiguity, thereby establishing the identity of a particular medicinal plant species. The guidelines also stressed upon the hiring of competent botanist or taxonomist, which will help in further establishing the identity of the medicinal plant species. So friends, in continuation with the previous lecture, today we are going to further discuss about the other aspects of this objective under the WHO guidelines on the conservation of medicinal plants. So another aspect of this guideline is botanical institutes should make a catalogue of all the plant species used for medicinal purposes in the country. So whatever botanical institutes that are being established in a particular country, all these institutes should be guided or should be told to make a catalogue of the different plant species or the medicinal plant species specifically that are available in their region, in their state, or in their area, and thereby gathering the data of all the medicinal plant species that are growing inside the country. So whenever any kind of information is required, one can easily it can easily be get through the databases that are being, or the catalogs that are being prepared by the Botanical Institute. Now, what the data that is required to be included in these catalog includes the scientific or the Latin name of that particular medicinal plant species, the vernacular name, the names by which that plant is being known in that specific region, its geographical distribution, where you can find the plant throughout the country, what are the geographical areas where this plant grows naturally or under wild conditions, the idea about the population of that particular species, whether the species in question is scarce or it is available abundantly. This also helps in establishing the conservation status of that particular species. So if a particular species is available in abundance, then obviously we should be least bothered about that particular species. But yes, if that species is having scarcity, then we should, depending upon the availability of that particular medicinal plant species or the population of that species, we will decide under which category as prescribed by IUCN, that is nearly extinct or endangered, vulnerable. So depending upon the population of the species, specific category is being assigned to that particular species. Its habitat, information about its habitat of that species is also required to be catalogued in that database. Then description of the plant part used and how it is collected. Now this is an important aspect, because majority of the time, if the plant is collected, irrespective which part of the plant is required for the specific utilization. So say for example, if the leaves of the particular plant are used for medicinal purpose, then if a person is not knowing what kind of plant part is to be collected or what kind of plant part is used for medicinal purpose, he is going to collect almost all the aerial parts, which will further damage the plant as well as eventually leading to the effect on the population of that particular medicinal plant species. One. Second is how it is collected. Now I also gave a brief idea about the sustainable collection practices. This is an important aspect, because the concern of conservation or the decrease in the population of a particular medicinal plant species is largely due to the non-sustainable collection practices that are being followed by the laborers which are hired to collect the plant species from the habitat or the natural habitat where they are growing. So if the collection practices are not proper, then obviously we are going to damage the overall plant, and eventually we will decrease its population. So how it is collected, it should also be documented in those catalogs or in those databases. Then it's information about the use of that particular species, whether the use belongs to the traditional uses, the use of a particular society. For say for example, if an ethnical group is using that particular plant species for inflammation in one region, and in another region another society or the tribal people, they are using that same plant, say for controlling the blood sugar level. So all kind of traditional uses, ethnical uses or ethnopharmacological uses should be documented in those catalogs. Then what are the pharmacological or the use of those medicinal plant species in medicine? When we say medicine, then we mean that their traditional uses, their ethnical uses, their ethnopharmacological uses have been established by using modern scientific guidelines, and some of them might be used in the clinical aspects. So all that kind of information, whether the plant is being used clinically for therapeutical purposes or not, whether that plant species was used traditionally for a specific disorder, so all kind of information should be documented in those catalogs. Then the information regarding the occurrence of that particular species in the protected area or not should also be documented. Whether the plant grows well under the protected area like national parks, botanical gardens, or it is growing wildly, such kind of information is also vital in initiating the conservation process if the plant species is vulnerable or threatened towards the endangered. Whether the cultivated or not, availability and location of the germplasm. So this is also an important aspect. Whether the medicinal plant species in question is cultivated or not. So if the plant species is under cultivation, then obviously it will give an idea about the commercial importance of that particular species, the volume of trade of that particular medicinal plant species, because majority of the plant species which are having high volume trade, they are under the cultivation. Then availability and location of germplasm. Germplasms are nothing. These include the organs or the material by which you can grow a new plant, like seeds are there, certain tissues are there by which you can develop a new plant. So whether the germplasm of the species in question is available or not. If it is available, then what is the location where those germplasms are stored? Because under extreme condition, these germplasms are used to develop new plants, and they are also developed to or rather I will say they are an important tool for the conservation of the medicinal plant species. Then guidelines also suggest that the National Herbarium should identify which of the medicinal plants are threatened in the wild so that they can be given priority in conservation programs. So first was National Herbarium should be set up, they should be established, the information regarding the medicinal plant species used in the country should be catalogued. Then they should also develop certain catalogs or databases wherein they should enlist all the plant species which are threatened or near extinction in the natural resources in the wild conditions, so that priority should be given to the conservation of those specific medicinal plant species. And such kind of databases, such kind of listing of medicinal plant species as per IUCN is known as red data books. So as you can see, the IUCN plant red data book. IUCN is International Union of Conservation of Nature. So this is an international organization, and they have developed certain data books or databases wherein all the endangered species are catalogued. But the problem is in the developing countries, because of their specifically the countries which are having rich tropical flora, because they do not have infrastructural resources in order to develop such kind of data books. So what kind of problems these countries face are lack of the basic field information on the status of individual plant species. So as I told you that such developing countries do not have sufficient infrastructural facilities where they can use such facilities to get the information on individual plant species or the status of the individual plant species, about their existence, about their population, about their abundance or scarcity in a particular region. Further, such kind of developing countries which are having rich tropical flora, they have huge number of plant species, and in my previous lecture I discussed that India is the second largest biodiversity after China with respect to the medicinal plant species, and sometimes due to the enormous number of medicinal plant species, it becomes very difficult to get information on each individual plant species. Third problem is with the lack of trained botanist. This is a very critical aspect, because trained botanists, trained taxonomists are the people who basically identify the plant species, who basically classify these plant species under various genera or families, thereby giving you the proper information of that particular species. So trained botanists are lacking, trained taxonomists are lacking. And last but not the least is the speed at which natural vegetation is being lost. Now, as we discussed, there is a tremendous increase in the demand of these medicinal plant, and therefore the speed at which they are being consumed from their natural resources, it is far more than the process by which we collect the information on these medicinal plant species, and therefore there is a huge gap between the data collection and the speed by which these medicinal plant species are lost from their natural habitat. And this is another problem by which we are not able to gather the relevant information about the particular species, because either we don't find that particular species in the region, or that species is not present because of over exploitation. Now, IUCN has categorized the medicinal plant species broadly on the basis of their evaluation first. So, there are species which are not evaluated, and there are species which are evaluated. When we say not evaluated, it means they have not been considered for the gathering of the desirable data or the required data. Whereas the species which are evaluated, they have been worked upon sufficient data, they have been worked upon to gather the required data on these species. And these evaluated species have been further categorized into data deficient and adequate data. Now, when we talk about data deficient, it means these are the species which do not have sufficient data that is required to catalog those species into those databases. So, therefore, these are categorized as data deficient. Whereas adequate data species, it means sufficient data regarding their population, regarding their availability in the wild sources, whether they are cultivated or whether they are not cultivated. So, all such kind of relevant or the required or the desired data is available on these species. Now, the species with adequate data are further categorized into least concern. It means they are wildly available, they are in abundance in wide geographical distribution. So, we are not concerned about their population, about their scarcity, about their vulnerability towards extinction. Then the second class is the near threatened. When we talk about near threatened, it means they have very limited population in the natural resource or in the wild conditions. Then the third category is the threatened category. This category I will take later on. Next is the extinct in the wild. Such kind of plant species are extinct from the wild sources, but they are available in under the protected regions, like botanical gardens are there, or national parks are there, where these species are being protected. But under natural resources or under wild conditions, they are extinct. And the last one is the extinct for which we don't find any individual species, any individual of that particular species, neither in the wild sources nor in the protected regions. Now, coming back to the threatened categories. Now, threatened categories are those which are under the danger of extinction. So, these threatened categories are further species falling under threatened categories are further categorized into vulnerable species, which are vulnerable toward extinction or endangerment. Second category is endangered, which are endangered towards extinction, and critically endangered, which are very near towards the extinction in wild. Now we move on to specific definitions of these categories that have been given by IUCN. Now the species are known as extinct in which the last individual has died or where systematic and time appropriate surveys have been unable to log even a single individual of that particular species. So such species where we don't find any single individual, whenever the surveys are being conducted, they are categorized as extinct. Second is extinct in the wild. Now these are those species whose members survive only in the captivity or as the artificially supported populations far outside their historical geographical range. So as I told you earlier also, these are those species which are only available in the protected areas. They are not found in their natural geographical range, their natural habitat where they grow wildly. But now we can find these species only in the protected regions, like botanical gardens are there, where the conditions are manipulated. All the supportive infrastructure is provided to that species in order to flourish. So such kind of species are known as extinct in the wild. Then we have critically endangered. Now these are the species that possess an extremely high risk of extinction as a result of rapid population decline of 80 to more than 90% over 10 years or over the period of 3 generations, a current population size of fewer than 50 individuals or other factors. So, critical endangered are the species where their population has declined from 80 to over 90% within the last decade or 10 years, or whenever the surveys are being conducted, they have less than 50 individual belonging to that species growing in the natural habitat under the wild conditions. So, such species are considered as critically endangered. Then we have endangered species. Now, these species that possess a very high risk of extinction as a result of rapid population declines of 50 to more than 70% over the previous 10 years. So, 80 to 90 was critically endangered. Endangered is 50 to over 70% over the past 10 years or 3 generations. And whenever a current population or the current population survey is being conducted, the number of individuals belonging to this species is less than 250. So, if you are conducting a survey of a particular medicinal plant species and its individuals are less than 250 under the wild condition, then such kind of medicinal species has been categorized as endangered species. Next is the vulnerable species, and these species possess a very high risk of extinction as a result of rapid population decline of 30 to more than 50%. It was 50 to 70 in case of endangered, 30 to more than 50 in case of vulnerable over the previous 10 years or 3 generations. And whenever the surveys to gather the information on their current population is being done, and if under that survey we found less than 1000 individuals belonging to that species that are present under the wild condition, then that specific species is considered as vulnerable as per IUCN guidelines. Then the other categories are near threatened, and these are the species that are close to becoming threatened or may meet the criteria for threatened status in the near future. Least concerned species are those that are persuasive and abundant after careful assessment. So, if they are available in abundance, they are widely distributed, they have a wide geographical distribution, vis-a-vis they have large population, such kind of species are considered as least concern. Then data deficient, these are the species in which the amount of the available data related to its risk of extinction is lacking in some way or the other. So, either we are not able to catalog such kind of species, we are not able to get the exact botanical identity of that particular species, we are not able to get the information regarding the scientific or the Latin name or the vernacular name of the species. Such kind of data which is required to be catalogued in the databases that are to be maintained, that are to be prepared by the National Herbarium, if such kind of desirable information, desirable data is not sufficient for a particular medicinal plant species, then we put that species under the category of the data deficient species. So, these were the few of the definitions by which IUCN has given for the species to be categorized according to their abundance or the population under the wild conditions. Now, IUCN system uses set of 5 quantitative criteria to assess the extinction risk of the given species. So, the rate of the population decline, that is 80 to more than 90% critically endangered, 50 to more than 70% endangered, threatened, so on and so forth. So, depending upon the rate of the population decline over a specified period of time, which was 10 years in case of the definitions given by IUCN. So, depending upon the rate of the extinction or the decline in the population, we can categorize different plant species under different categories. Then the geographic range. So, say for example, if a medicinal plant species was earlier available in a wide geographical range, but over the period of time, say in the last 10 years, which has been specified by IUCN, or the period that is required by 3 generations, if their geographical range has significantly decreased, then also one has to be very careful in categorizing that particular species under different categories prescribed by IUCN. Whether the species already possesses a small population size, if the species is already having a very less number of individuals growing under wild conditions, then again one has to be very careful regarding that particular species to be categorized under appropriate category that has been given by IUCN. Now, whether the species is very small or lives in a restricted area. So, if there are certain medicinal plants which have a very low growth rate and they are very they grow in a very restricted area. So, such kind of species are very vulnerable towards extinction because they have a very restricted geographical distribution. They grow in a very restricted area, and vis-a-vis they also, the number of the individuals of that particular species because of slow growth rate is also very limited. So, such kind of species are more vulnerable, and depending upon the area where they grow, depending upon the size of the area where they grow, depending upon the number of individuals of that particular species that are found in the wild region, they should be appropriately categorized. Next is whether the results of quantitative analysis indicate high probability of extinction in wild. Now, these kind of quantitative analysis are done over the period of time. Analysis are done on the data that has been collected over the period of time. So, after analysis of the data, if one finds that there is high probability of extinction in wild, then obviously such kind of medicinal plant species should be carefully categorized, whether under endangered or vulnerable or critically endangered, and so on and so forth. So, again, the data collection is an important aspect, and if you are not collecting the data properly, then obviously you might miss certain medicinal plant species, though they might be critically endangered, but because data is not properly collected or has not been properly analyzed, such species can skip from their categorization under critical endangered or vulnerable species. So, friends, this was about another aspect of the conservation of the medicinal plant species. So, in the next lecture, we will start with the next aspect of this guidelines. Thank you.